Good morning and welcome to today's Leaders Live Q&A. We're here for half an hour. I will be doing my best to answer as many questions as I can, primarily around the town centre consultation that we've opened. We do only have half an hour, and I am aware that last time we didn't manage to get through a huge number of them, but please be aware that the team that are behind the scenes will be available to answer as many questions as they can over the next couple of days. My diary is back to back, so the chances of me being able to come back to you directly on social media is low. But do remember, everybody has at least 2 ward councillors. So if they've got queries that relate to their local area, that's your first port of call, as well as the reported system for those sort of grumbles that we all have from our local area. So the feedback from the survey that we started has been really, really good. We've had over 2,100 responses already. We only started it at the beginning of the month. And the background is that during the election period, and to be fair, during the last couple of years, we've all seen that, Bournemouth's former glory has faded a little bit, and we've all got great ideas about how we would do things differently, and we've been to other places that have got really exciting things going on, and so why can't we do that here? So with the changing nature of town centres and the way we're living our lives now is the perfect opportunity for us to take stock, pick up all those ideas from people, and try and think about it a different way. The council doesn't have loads of money. It doesn't own a lot of the land and the buildings, particularly in the town centres. But we do have what we might call convening power, be able to bring people together. We know sort of how to unlock things. And there's loads of people wanting to invest. They just don't know what we want, and they need the confidence to know that there's people behind it. So this is your opportunity to be part of that. 2 stages. First stage is to open up the consultation to you, which is where we are now. And then once we've gathered all of those ideas, we'll then bring it together with the Town Centre Summit, including everybody else that's taken their interest so far. So let's go through some of the questions that have been submitted in advance. The first one I've got is about sort of modernising the town centre. So how are we going to develop the town centre to be suitable for modern day life? That's from Jonathan. The reality is that, like most towns, shopping has not been the priority of the public. So shopping is still really important. Lots of people have gone online. People are wanting more of an experience when they shop. They don't necessarily want the sort of old traditional style shops that we had before. So we need to think differently about what we use our town centre for. We need to think about people coming in and spending time. Hospitality is really important. Experiences, activities, just spending time out in the open air, making sure the public realm is good. So it's really, really important that we understand what that means to you. I think the reality is that we need to think about building homes in town centres as well. Traditionally, town centres have been where people sort of live out. They come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, they work, they shop, they go home, and the place sort of just closes down. That then feeds a narrative that it's a daytime or nighttime, and that then can feed into antisocial behaviour and a sort of sense of no-go. So by actually bringing people to live in the town centre, loads of people that want that urban life, let's embrace that and have the right homes in the right places. So yeah, please also share examples of other places you've been. We've all been to towns and cities and gone, oh my God, that is amazing. There is the facility for you to actually put your photographs in onto the survey. So I think that we're going to bring up thank you very much. The survey is just here. Go in and you can literally upload a photo and go do that. And then we can put that into the mix. So hopefully that sort of answers the question. The next question, traffic. Traffic is always going to be an issue, isn't it? So Mel has asked, how do you plan to deal with increased traffic volumes? Now, I'm not naive enough to think that everybody's going to get on a bike or a bus. Totally get that. But actually, if more people are living in town, then those people are less likely to be reliant on a car. And as cars change, I think we have to be realistic and say actually, my kids, I've got 4 kids, 3 of them drive, only one's got a car. They don't feel the need to each have a car. They love using the bus. With lower bus prices, I think that the key is actually really good bus routes from all communities that are reliable, regular, clean. We know our bus services are good where we have them. The problem is they take a long time because they're getting congested with the other traffic. And there are some parts of our community that don't have good bus services. So, there's a real focus on trying to do that. More and more people are taking to 2 wheels or walking around. If we can create the local facilities people want near where they live so that they can do those things, then people are doing those short journeys in a different way. The congestion is less of an issue. But I think there's a question there about, car parking. There have been plans in the past to develop on quite a lot of the car parks. We need to think really carefully. There are some car parks that genuinely don't get much use and could be better used for something else. There are other car parks that, would be total chaos if we got rid of. So please don't get the impression that we're going to be paving over all the car parks. That's not the plan. But we do need to think about how we will move around. Multi-storey car parks, it turns out there are some issues with electric cars. They can be tricky on the upper floors of multi-storey car parks, that perhaps they weren't built for the size of cars that we've got now. So it is a big question, but not every journey has to be in a car. Some journeys do, and so please, this anti-car coalition that we had was rubbish. Most people that like to cycle and walk and get on the bus or use the train also have a car, and I think we all need to use the right vehicle for the right journey, and that shouldn't exclude anybody. And there are some people who have to drive, they don't have an option, and we need to make plenty of room for those people. So let's move on. So what have we got here? I would take pictures. Sherry has told us I'd take pictures of hotels that have been turned into dumps with security guards, but I'm too scared to go into town. Sherry, I've certainly got a question in advance about antisocial behaviour, so I think there's probably an appropriate time to take that. And what are we going to do about antisocial behaviour? There is a fear of crime, and I totally get that. The evidence is that antisocial behaviour reduced last summer by 25%. We do have a really dedicated team of CSAS officers. CSAS is our council officers that carry accreditation from the police to be able to take some of the functions of a police officer. So they have that explicit permission. And they are there to support the police so that the police can actually deal with the more serious crime. There are also town rangers, and the town rangers are funded by the bid, and they have a different function in trying to make sure people know where they're going. They work with some of the shopkeepers in trying to deal with some of the shoplifting issues and just keeping the eyes and ears around town. There's some move that the police are working with the council. We meet with them regularly. I met with the commander for BCP last week, and we were talking about creating a Bournemouth Town team and moving resource into the town centre, because if you don't feel safe to go into town, then you're not going to go into town, however brilliant it is. And it's the same argument about car parking, isn't it? If what's in town isn't what you want to see, it doesn't matter whether it's 50p car parking or £2 car parking or £3, you're still not going to go there. If you don't feel safe, there's nothing to see, you're not going to go. So our focus is on trying to make sure that we can reduce antisocial behaviour, that we can try and deal with the causes of crime. The police are the prime organisation for that, and I would encourage people to make sure they report crime, because one of the biggest problems is where people presume that no one is going to respond, they don't bother reporting it. And if they don't bother reporting it, then you get that sort of knock-on effect that the police can quite rightly say, well, we didn't know, so we didn't do. So report. The more evidence there is, the more pressure we can help to put on the police for you to make sure that there are people around. And then talking about the derelict hotels specifically, the market is changing. Not everybody wants to come to a British seaside hotel when they come here. And we do have to recognise that some of those hotels would be better used as housing. Some of the buildings don't have architectural merit or historic value, and there might be an argument for knocking some buildings down and replacing them with really good buildings where people can have a really, great life, where the building behaves, the building is good for the environment, and people can actually live a life without fuel poverty, and with loads of light and with great facilities. So I think we just have to be a bit brave about what we do, but we do, and that's why we're doing this, is to make sure that we're trying to tap into that. But let's move on to the next question, which I suppose is linked really. After we had a question about homelessness, you might have seen. So Karen's asked, how specifically are we looking to reduce homelessness? We were really thrilled a couple of weeks ago to be selected by the Prince of Wales, Prince William, for his foundations, one of the 6 sort of flagship towns, flagship places, to try and look at homelessness in a more holistic way. The reason that BCP was chosen was because of the homelessness partnership working that we've been doing for the last 4 years. And it's about not dealing with homelessness in isolation. So a lot of the people we have who are street homeless, and the numbers have gone down dramatically. We had 72 street homeless people in 2019. At the most recent count, it was 29. There's been a little bit of an increase in the last couple of months. That tends to be seasonal. People will come to the seaside if they're stuck outside. They think they might as well be here. But there is a really serious conversation to be had about who we have a legal responsibility for and who we don't have a legal responsibility for. And with a very small number of places available within hostels and within temporary housing, and eventually within our council house, our social housing, we have to be clear that that needs to go to the people in the most need, and it has to go to the people for whom we have a responsibility. So people who are from Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole are the people we should be focusing on first. And there are a small number of the street homeless who actually said, we don't want to come in, we want to be outside. We can't force people in. We need to make sure that they're safe and well, and we need to make sure that they're not creating antisocial behaviour and other problems around them. But there is a limit to what you can do. You can't drag people in off the streets. At the same time, there's a lot of homelessness that you don't see. We have people who are sofa surfing, people who are just about managing to get from week to week. We have a horrible number of people who are in Premier Inns and travel lodges because there genuinely is nowhere else for them to go. And the solution to that is we need to build new homes. And then you've got that conflict, haven't you? As people don't want homes because where do we put them? What's the impact going to be on doctor surgeries? What's the impact going to be on roads and schools? But fundamentally, there are hundreds of children, our children, currently living in places that I would not want my children to be living in, and they are our priority. So a homelessness model is not just looking at street homeless, it's looking at people in temporary housing and people in inadequate housing. So we're working with the Prince on a range of how do you get people who are homeless into home and stay there, so that if you've got somebody that's lived on the streets for weeks or months and they're not used to being in a flat, very often their behaviours and their addictions and their lifestyle and their mental health means that that's really difficult to manage. It's really difficult to manage paying bills. It's really difficult to manage how you live alongside other people and how people behave in a community when they have to think about others. And so there's a load of support that needs to go in. And if that support doesn't go in at the beginning, and we don't actually bring that wraparound support in, it often fails. And people then end up back out on the street, or they go into a flat and then they can't pay the rent. So the landlord kicks them out and you go back into the circle. So the focus around the new project is really lifting people up and going on the journey with them and making sure that homelessness is a once only rare occasion. and that the scheme he's doing with us does come with some funding and does give us the opportunity to create a dedicated space at the end that can be a sort of move on space that helps people to get work and build their confidence, their self-esteem and their resilience and their literacy, and put them in a space where they can live life as we would all aspire to do. So, it's complicated, it's going to take a long time, but we're all dedicated to making it happen. And, hopefully the work that was started in 2019, and to be fair, continued throughout, whatever political colour, it's something we're all passionate about, and we're going to carry it on. So, this isn't something people are divided over. This is something we all want to make happen. So there's a question here about why Bournemouth and why not Paul or Christchurch? And that is I'm from Paul, so I understand people thinking, you always just talk about Bournemouth. There is a particular problem to answer Raymond's question about Bournemouth. We have footfall data that our teams use and share with the relevant sort of organisations, the business organisations, about taken from mobile phone footage that tells us how many people come into Bournemouth, how long they stay, where they go. So we can actually think about how we manage everything from parking to, which bits need more street cleansing and litter bin emptying and things like that. What it's telling us is that in Bournemouth, there has been a 33% reduction in footfall. So that's fewer people coming, staying for less time. And then the evidence we can see on the streets is that shops are closing and businesses are telling us they're finding life more difficult. So businesses then want more support. So it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So it makes sense to actually say, well, that's where the biggest problem is. That's where we can have the biggest difference. Reputationally, it's really important, as our town centre and our beach are so close, that people, when they come to the beach, they're experiencing the town as well. So we want to make sure people are having a good experience. Paul and Christchurch are doing so much better. Of course, they've got some investment that's needed, but actually there's some really exciting stuff happening at the Dolphin Centre with the work in there. The footfall is bucking the trend. Christchurch, again, has got a different market. Yes, it's got its problems. People are working in there, but actually those problems we can probably resolve if we can fundamentally stop things going wrong in Bournemouth. So that's where we've got the most to gain. That's actually where we're sucking so much resource in terms of our homelessness team, our antisocial behaviour team, our refuse team. They're all having to come to Bournemouth. And if we can lift Bournemouth up, it will allow resources to come back out to the other places. And most of us, whether we live in Bournemouth, Poole, Christchurch, Wimborne, Ferndown, or further afield, at some point we want to come into Bournemouth because there's something that's there that we don't have in the slightly smaller centres. So that's why we're focusing on that. But we haven't forgotten other places. And I think there's loads we can learn from this that we can probably replicate. And there will be things that people say, I'd like an X in Bournemouth, and we can't do it in Bournemouth, but we might be able to do it in Poole. So we might actually find some solutions for other places. So I'm going to move to a question about flooding. Now, a question about flooding, I'm not 100% sure where it comes from, so I'm going to try and interpret it. Alan has asked about road gullies being unblocked as they're causing flooding. Now, I think that Alan is asking here is, we get a lot of flooding in the gardens, which impact, and actually, what's the cause for that? Fundamentally, our road gullies are in every street, in every part of BCP. And as I said at the beginning, every ward has at least 2 councillors. And one of the things that councillors spend a lot of their time doing, I was talking to a councillor yesterday, and we were comparing our mobile phones, and we were chatting about how many photographs on our phones of things like block gullies. We are crazy people who will spend our time walking along, spotting a gully that's full of leaves or overgrown with grass, and then we'll photograph it, we'll report it in, and then the teams go out and respond to it. We have 750 miles of road in BCP. So, it's an industry just trying to get those things empty. So we have to go where the problem is. So my point on that really is, you have at least 2 councillors, use them. And secondly, we have a system called Report It. So for those sort of mainly environmental things, whether it's potholes, gullies, dead trees, overflowing dog poo bins, broken window panes, graffiti, those sorts of things, you can report them all on the website. It's quite simple. You can upload a photo if you want to. You can leave your details for an update if you want to, or you can do it just as a guest with the information only. And once that information is in the system, we're actually working on a piece of kit at the moment that will go straight to the cabs. So the cabs will actually know the live information of what's coming in, and they'll be able to go around and respond to it. There just isn't enough capacity for us to sort of go up and down every road on a rotation because we'd be in the wrong place. So we're looking at where are the reports coming in, where are the most tree-lined places. They're the ones that are going to get the most leaves or pine needles, if it's somewhere that's got those pine trees. How do we respond to that? So through that, we can stop the flooding. There is a more fundamental problem, and that's climate change. Climate change is going to mean that we have water coming in a different way. It also means that when we have flooding, the groundwater is more sodden, and so it doesn't drain away as well as it should do. And there's something we can all do there, and that is, if you've got a garden and you can plant trees, great. If you've got a front garden, don't pave it over, or at least if you've got to park on it, have a permeable surface so stuff can drain away. Using water butts, not having plastic grass, all of those things mean that we can use the land more effectively and reduce the amount of water that's coming onto the roads when we have a big downpour, which means that the gullies are less likely to get over you know what I mean. So that's really what we need to do. So I'm desperate to move on to, I'm sorry, Lee thinks that we're talking about climate change rubbish. I'm going to have to agree to disagree, Lee. Climate change is real. It's here. We have to respond to it. We need to be spending more money on adapting and mitigating. And fundamentally, if we're going to have flooding here, we need to actually stop the water getting down there. And if people keep putting plastic gardens down, then you're not really helping the situation. So we can all make a difference. So I'm looking at lots of reactions to the comments about gully, so I'm not going to go to them because that's a chat between the rest of you. What's the rationale? Aaron's asking, what's the rationale between limiting residents to 3 suggestions? Aaron, feel free to ask as many times as you like. It's literally about capacity. If we put in page after page after page, that can be quite intimidating for people who've just got one idea. If you've got more than one idea, log in more than once. Absolutely not a problem. We deliberately haven't got an ideas board. It's not because we don't want to encourage you to do that. It's because you have a problem with sort of contagion. What I didn't want to happen was that somebody put some comment about, I don't know, there's rats in such and such a road, get rid of the rats. And all you end up with is a whole load of negative chat about rats. And actually, if somebody puts in a great idea, I want to hear their idea, whether there's 1 like for it or 100 likes. And you end up with an ideas board where, a special interest group gets behind something because they don't really want it. They just, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll tick that. And then we think 100 people like it. If 100 people want something, then we want to see 100 people separately submitting that idea. Then we know that 100 people, one who lives here and here and here and here, and here's a couple of lines about why, we actually get a much better idea of what people genuinely want, rather than a contagious effect. I love ideas board. I think they're a really great idea. But for this, we actually want to keep it super simple and allow people, children, elderly people, people who've gone in the library and asked the librarian to help them do it because they're not very computer literate, to just go, I just want to say this. I really want this shop here. I went to see this place and I thought this was lovely. Or we want to keep it really simple. So that's why it's not an oversight, but feel free, Aaron, to go in 2, 3, 4 times if that's what you want. So Going Nowhere has asked a question about avian flu. We're all really worried about avian flu. It's particularly this time of year. I know people that are due to be going to Brownsea to watch Romeo and Juliet in a couple of weeks. I'm sure we can find somewhere to stage that in Poole Park or something. But, of course, we're waiting for the details around the COVID inquiry and how to get more prepared. We're working within our integrated care partnership with our health partners and other partners in preparing for future pandemics. We're preparing for emergencies all the time. The system regularly has emergency preparedness days where they'll sort of practice responses to different types of emergencies. So be assured that the teams that are good at doing that, they're doing that stuff. I think we did a really good job in COVID. We reacted really, really quickly. It was a once in a century incident, and we do have to try and do some business as usual, because it's had a huge effect, pushing back a lot of the ideas that we had and a lot of the work that was going on in communities. Builds of some of the houses that we desperately need, and schools and other things, all got horribly delayed. So yes, it's something we need to be doing, but we need to make sure that we do carry on, and we take our guidance from government, from the local government association, which represent councils, and get the work that they're coming on, and take the advice that they have. Sally Harris has asked about dogs. I don't know if we've had this before. Sally's asked about the unintended consequences of banning dogs. So here's the question, right? I've got a dog. I love my dog to pieces. But there's plenty of places that aren't sensitive I can take my dog. And I don't necessarily think that banning the dogs from the beaches pushes people into sensitive areas, because I think there are plenty of places that you can take your dog. We've got some huge parks. We've got Merrick Park, we've got Kings Park, we've got Poole Park. Most of our areas have got brilliant large open spaces that can be used. And I take my dog to the two places in Poole probably twice a week. We either go to the bit of Branksome Chine or the bit down at Sandbanks, so he can have his run on the beach. But, I'm also a mum, and before we had our dog, the last thing we wanted was dogs on the beach. If you're sitting playing with your kids or you're having a picnic and you get somebody else's dog comes up to you and, steals your bucket and spade, or, messes on the beach just right next to where your children are having a picnic, it's not nice. Not everybody chooses to have a dog. If you choose to have a dog, there are lots of places you can take them. You do not need to take them to sensitive places. And my argument back there would be, let's talk about whether we need to restrict the more sensitive parts of Hengistbury Head. Our heathlands have restrictions. Dogs have to be on leads. I walk my dog most days on Upton Heath, but we always have him on a lead, and he is always kept on the path. I'm really angry every time I see, and I have been a bit of a Karen, and I will say to people, get your dog on a flipping lead. It's not fair. It's nesting season. So, it is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And I think we need to do more patrols to make sure that the sensitive parts of our areas like Hengistbury Head are not being impacted by dogs. A final question about, Ben has asked a question about tree trimming. So Ben's question specifically about BH7. I'm not going to get into the details of a particular area. That's not appropriate. You have to at least 2 ward councillors. Go to them. They will help you with the specifics. But I think that the point here is that there are problems with trees that were the wrong trees planted. Trees that have got roots that are above ground can be a real problem. And then what we've done is we've put bricks on top of them. So now the bricks are all doing this, and then that creates a trip hazard. There is a real conversation to be had about, do we need to pave around these trees? I mean, I'm looking in my ward, and my instinct is to go, let's take all those bricks up and actually allow the tree to breathe. And when we're planting new trees, let's make sure that we're giving them space. So we do need to look at maintaining those trees properly. There are tens of thousands, if not millions of trees that the council owns, and we simply cannot get to all of them. You know, we have a £44 million shortfall for next year, just for next year's budget, and the budget next year, following year, will be worse. £44 million has got to come out of what we spend. So I'm not going to sit here and promise we're going to spend more money on, you know, more tree visits. We have to be more sensible about whether those curbstones should be there. If they are an area that people are walking, you know, should we be having block paving? Should it be tarmac? Should we have bigger areas around the trees? How can we reduce the need to maintain some of those trees? Where they need to be cut back, we need to have a programme where people understand when they can expect them to be cut back and what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. And, you know, if there is a council tree that's overhanging your garden, you have a right, if it's not a protected tree, to cut it back as long as it doesn't damage the tree. So you know, there is a bit of a responsibility on us to do our bit as neighbours. If we want to live in the streets with trees, then there's a price that comes with that. So I don't know what the problem is with BH7. I don't have any belief that a particular postcode has been neglected. That's it's easy to feel that way, but it is true that, for example, with street cleansing, just as an example of what happened when BCP was formed, Bournemouth and Poole both had street cleansing facilities. Christchurch's street cleansing machines were part of Dorset Council. And so when Dorset disconnected from Christchurch had absolutely no machines or people that came with it. It went back to Dorset, to Dorchester. So we then had a situation where the teams covering Bournemouth and Poole now had to cover Christchurch as well. And that meant that over the last 4 years, we've had to realign all of the rounds for things like street cleansing and gully cleansing and trees, and all of those environmental things have had to be spread across more areas, which is going to mean that the regime isn't as tight as perhaps it was in the past. So there's also, the other thing just to mention was, for some of those services, one or more of the towns will have had outside contractors doing that work. And while they had a contract, they were running to the contract and we couldn't vary it. I believe those contracts have now either all come to an end or are just coming to an end. And that's allowed our Director of Environment to be able to look at all of the work that those outside people are doing and align them with need. So there are some areas that have more problems with gullies, there are some areas that have more problems with trees, there are some areas that have more problem with litter. And at the moment, we're trying to go, okay, well, this area needs more of this, but doesn't really use much of that. This area, actually, the community have got that under control. This area, actually, we have a lot of tourists and they create a problem of their own. So how do we manage that? So it is a complicated piece of work. 4 years sounds like it's been a long time, but take out 18 months of COVID, plus the cost of living crisis, it's not been the easiest of times, but we're getting there and we're doing our best. So I'm going to have to call it there. I'm so sorry, there's lots of questions that haven't been answered. Please do put your ideas into the Town Centre Survey. It will be open until the 4th of August. If you don't, I'm assuming you have access to the internet because you're watching this. But if you have friends and family that don't, we have over 20 libraries that all have the ability to go on and help people to go into this, or get your friends and family to do it through you. It's really helpful if we know who you are and where you're from, just so we can make sure if there are parts of the area that are not responding, we can do more to push out there. But if you want to stay anonymous, that's okay too. Thank you very much for your questions, and I will see you again soon, and the team will do their best to answer some of the questions I've missed, which I won't be able to see as soon as I come offline. Thanks very much.